Okay, we will make a start in just a moment, so I'll just give you just a few more seconds to take your seats. Okay, good morning everyone, both here and online, and welcome to the next session. This is session 11 in the conference programme. My name's Nicola Laurent, I'm the State Manager of the South Australian Office of the National Archives, and also convener of the Reference, Access and Public Programmes Special Interest Group of the ASA, which I usually refer to as RAPSIG, because for obvious reasons. I'd just like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And extend that acknowledgement to the all traditional custodians of the lands from which people are joining us today. I might just mention, I usually work and live on the lands of the Kaurna people in Adelaide. So this is session 11. We're focusing today on the changing nature of the role of the archivist and the relationship to society more generally, and just looking at, in various ways, looking at how we might adapt to those changes in our profession. What we will do after each, we've got three presentations, 4 speakers, and we will take 2 or 3 questions after each presentation, and then hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end to take any more. We will take questions from both the room and online, so if you are online, please, I encourage you to submit your questions online. So, first up, we've got 2 speakers who I'm sure don't need too much introduction, but I'll have a go anyway. So we've got David Fricker. David is currently Special Advisor to the Director General of the National Library and Archives of the UAE. And David was the Director General of the National Archives of Australia from 2012 until 2021, and recently completed 2 terms as the President of the International Council on Archives. Nicola Laurent is, of course, the President of the Australian Society of Archivists. She's the Senior Project Archivist on the Find and Connect web resource project at the University of Melbourne, as well as being the International Council on Archives New Professionals Programme Coordinator, and a founder of the Trauma Informed Archives Community of Practice. And I'll leave it there. So Nicola and David are going to speak. So this conference is, as we know, is titled Here We Are. They're going to talk a bit about who is here and who isn't here, and what changes we might need to address in terms of having a more representative selection of speakers at future conferences.
I should have tested. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for that introduction. I'd also like just to acknowledge the country that we're on, and this was the practice. We did learn a bit of Ngambri language, so if I could just say Naji and Jamali, Ngambri, Gurmal, Walgalu, Wallabaloa, Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, Majigang Yanyibu and Jandu. Just pay my respects to the Ngambri, to the Gurmal, to the Walgalu, Wallabaloa, the Wiradjuri and the Ngunnawal, upon whose lands city and the surrounds, the city of Canberra and the surrounds have been built. And of course extend my respects to all First Nations people with this today or joining us online. Thank you.
Thanks, and I'll also acknowledge that I live and work on the lands of the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations in Naarm, Melbourne. So today we really want this to be more of a conversation starter than anything else, and he's laughing because he did make the slides, but then I added some of the photos, so we're here for the laughs as well. But this is really, coming from this conversation from 2 different perspectives. And we wanted to, have this conversation because when we thought about who presents at conferences, we hear from this similar voices over and over again. And as these photos show, you also hear from us over and over again. And that's part of why we wanted to bring this conversation to this conference and to open up, this conversation and to see what ideas and where we can move forward and think of new ways so that we do hear new voices and new presenters. when we think of the Australian archival community, we know it's really diverse, and there's people who are working, studying, volunteering, a whole range of approaches for how people engage with the archival community. There's a wide range of sectors and organisations that are represented. I mean, I know next door there's a panel of school archivists. I think that's probably the first time the ASA conference has seen a panel of school archivists in a little while, and it's very exciting. And I know that happened because the program committee put a lot of effort into making sure there was those voices represented. But we don't often hear from community archives, and even within the larger organisations, we do often hear from the same people each time. There's different cultural backgrounds, there's different communities, people with different lived experiences. And so, yes, we wanted to kind of bring this to the floor, I guess, and openly and be transparent about the conversation we wanted to have and our role as well in perpetuating this problem. So we're going to have a bit of a dialogue. So yeah.
Yes, there will be a dialogue, yes, I will.
So I'm encouraged. It's great. We're encouraging some self-reflection as well from ourselves. You know, even at this conference, we're both on this program twice. I spoke yesterday with my colleagues at the back of the room on trauma-informed archival practice, and David is one of the keynotes later today. So I'm going to ask you, David, to reflect on why we are part of the problem.
Yeah, because, well, we'll explore it during the discussion, but it's important, I think, and I thought about this a lot as well with the ICA, as Nick mentioned earlier, and I think many people know I've been heavily involved with the ICA. As part of my duties over in Abu Dhabi at the moment, I'm working very hard on the next Congress for the ICA in October next year, which I expect to see all of you present at in Abu Dhabi. But it's a big issue because you need these events to be, of course, interesting and set a very high standard for a scientific program, a professional program, but we need to develop the profession, we need to develop our community, and we need to, as we did at the keynote this morning, we need to work harder, I think, to make sure that these conferences also are opening up our minds and are also bringing up the next generation of thinkers who are going to take our profession into the future.
We should definitely know by now that I can't work a clicker for the life of me. So this was one of the things we said, like, clusters of our community regularly remain underrepresented at an event, which we should be helping to build our profession and to provide space for speakers from all areas of archives. So I'm going to make you do the clicking. There we go. We got there in the end. He's going to disown me soon. It'll be fine. So we wanted to start with the impediments because we really wanted to explore what we think are the barriers to this. And, you know, we've put them out in a range of different ways. And we do want to acknowledge that, yes, while we've and, you know, had roles that are quite senior in professional associations, there's many people that make a conference happen, and everybody brings a different perspective to how these can work. But there are certain similarities in how conferences are run, and that can be impediments to who is willing to engage with a conference. I'm just going to let you go next.
Oh, yes, well, maybe I can use. There are clues up there on the slide.
That's why you did the slides.
That's right. No, look, and I mean, hands up, to quick show of hands, how many people in the room have been on program committees for conferences and organised? Right, so it's a good representation in the room. Oh, there you go. And it is the case. Well, often the program committee is formed too late, right? We always leave it, till too long to find those volunteers that can come forward and actually do the conference organisation. We often look for new volunteers, if you like, to do the program committee each time. We have a new convener for every conference. We have a new group, coming up to form the thing. And as a result of that, often I think we tend to inherit the model that we used for the last conference to save time. Let's reuse. That's what we do, isn't it? We reuse and but that is also a formula for just sort of staying, continually repeating the formula of the past instead of sort of breaking new ground. And a few of the sort of formulaic things that I think come up over and over again when we do these conference organisers or organised events. So stuff on the slide there. And the first one is setting the goals. And often, if a conference is for an association or if it's for a group, there is going to be a revenue, goal in there, whether we like it or not. This is a major source of revenue for the association, for the organisation, etc. And so, you need to have a program that's going to get a good roll-up, a good attendance. And so, that's where it starts. So you might need a few star speakers. Who did we have last time? That got good feedback. We'll get that person back again. The standard of papers, of course, we must have conferences, this current session, accepted, that have a very high standard of delivery. And
we're definitely not getting accepted next year.
And so, but there again, you sort of think, okay, well, it's got to have a high academic standard, and maybe we want to publish the papers after the conference, these sorts of things. And so, if you're setting out to have a good roll-up, a good standard of program, good standard of papers, and you want a good financial outcome, then that doesn't leave any space for this altruistic goal. You're not sort of necessarily making space to say, and where are those crazy people going to come from? How will we get those topics that we haven't heard of before coming in to the conference? So that was sort of the thing in the goal setting aspect of it. And I think that's something where I think we could change the way we approach these, is at that goal setting stage to actually set down some particularly measurable goals indeed, to have new voices being heard and have greater diversity. Should I continue or?
How many points do you Yeah, go on.
Well, I will very briefly, Nicola, on the sub-themes. So, the next, and that is quickly followed by, okay, the conference needs to have the themes, and generally you come up with 3 or 4, sub-themes which are going to kind of frame the way we call for papers. And so those themes also start to narrow down the topics and therefore the speakers and the voices that we're going to hear at the conference. And so when we set those themes, I think also we tend to stay in our comfort zone. And sometimes I think we've already decided who would be really good keynotes for this year. And so sometimes we kind of, make the theme fit the keynote speaker, as opposed to saying, well, where's the profession need to go this year? What are the themes we need to be exploring this year? And let's not sort of design it around last year's issues or last year's keynotes. That's probably enough from me on that. Thank you. Thank you, Nicola.
So we did discuss impediments generally being conferences being a bit risk adverse. There's not a huge appetite always for untried topics and untried speakers sometimes. I think it depends on the conference how much flexibility there is in that. But if I can, there we go. But we thought the other side of the kind of impediment process is really around the submission process itself. It can be quite complex, quite formulaic. They can be evaluated, certainly at the initial stage, with a quite hard and fast pass-fail, rather than really reviewing it with recognition that perhaps it's a first-time person who's written the abstract or is trying to speak. I remember when I first tried to write an abstract, it was daunting and I did not know what I should be putting in it. How much do you address the theme? How much flexibility do you have in that process? And I was really lucky to work in a supportive workplace, so I had colleagues who could review my abstract and to help me, write one that was going to fit within the kind of process that people would expect. But I think if you're coming from a small archive, or perhaps you work by yourself, or you don't have that community of support, then it can be really daunting and it can be intimidating to work out how to get through that process. And you've had experience being on the kind of evaluation side of it as well.
Yeah, and here, I've never written an abstract.
Yes, because I wrote this one as well, so we'll just make that point.
But it's true. And, I'm retired now. I can say these things out in the public, but it's true. There is this sort of class system that, if you're a first time, if you're new to this, it actually is a lot of hard work and it's a very alien process. But if you were someone like me in my former life, in the right job at the right time, it's just, these opportunities came begging. It occurred to me just then when you were going through that, I've never written an abstract.
I tried, he wasn't keen.
I know. And I think we should be aware of that. We should make it as easy for first time or sort of newbies, if you like, as it is for those more established in the profession to come along, because the idea of a conference is to open our minds and expand our discussions. And the other thing about, as I was saying earlier, about we tend to borrow from the past, I have sat on the other side where the evaluations are going on, and again, a few of us put our hands up before, and that first stage where you're doing the evaluation of submissions, it can be a fairly brutal, swipe left, swipe right sort of process, when papers are coming in, and you sort of think, and normally we have a rubric, and there's like 5 things that we've got to see on a paper. And at that first step, if you sort of fail 1 or 2 out of the 5, well, not even fail, but if you don't meet the threshold, that will then, okay, you're out, and then you don't come back in because you still have way too many papers, for this. And so, that on that rubric, there isn't, generally speaking, something that says, has this person ever spoken, at a conference before? Has this, or maybe there are some inclusivity and diversity, things coming into conferences now that hasn't always been in the past. And so there is this sort of pass-fail system that we go through to admit papers in. And then on top of that, as you're just saying, that, it's not necessarily a friendly process. If you imagine yourself at a conference giving a paper to your peers, that process, that engaging, that enjoyable professional process has got nothing to do with the process of doing an abstract and doing like a mini exam to get on the conference. So we should make that process a lot more like the conference itself. And maybe, include on the criteria for evaluation, on that initial rubric and on that initial evaluation criteria, special acknowledgement that, this is somebody new, a new voice that we haven't heard of before from a different community that is underrepresented, or from a different part of our profession that's underrepresented. So I do think, that there's plenty of scope for us to be doing that, to make that initial process that much more friendly for first-timers, or to even have a slightly separate channel to welcome people who are unfamiliar with this process to come into the conference. And then there's the other section. I'll let you roll on, Nicola, to talk about the other part, once they are actually present at the conference.
Yes, we wanted to acknowledge as well that impediments can absolutely be resource related, like costs for attendance can be prohibitive. Perhaps online is giving different options for presenting. There's different price points and things. There can be a lack of familiarity with expectations, with process, with technology. It can be really difficult to kind of break into networking circles, to build a profile. And all these things can therefore put people off from considering even speaking, I think, or even coming to a conference in itself. But I'm going to move us on.
Oh, okay. Just really good points up there, but that's all right. We'll talk about that later.
Well, we need to get to the positives as well. So we didn't just want it to be a negative conversation. We did want to consider some of the enablers and some of the positives which we are seeing already as coming into conferences. But yeah, what we can be doing potentially more of. And so we've listed some here, such as conference planning, conference format, assistance packages, maybe even including things in sponsorship packages. I think conference format is quite interesting. Lightning talks is something newer that the ASA's brought in, and the ICA had it as well. Poster sessions, I find them quite difficult, to be honest. I find a poster harder than a presentation, so I think that's always an interesting one. But are there different ways we could be looking at how people can present at conferences moving forward that is more welcoming for a first time? Like, how can we make these spaces feel safe for people to get up and to share their ideas and to share what they've been working on?
And that, my other thing about the difference between on-site and online, I think, technology is a wonderful thing. I think the COVID, awful experience with COVID has taught us to use a lot more of that sort of virtual technology. But it is a fact, I think, that, you get a lot more, obviously, socialisation, interaction on site than you do online. And as the point Nicola just made, if you're a first-time speaker or you're from a small institution, that institution may not want to give you the airfare to get to the conference, but they'll pay the online registration fee. So straight away, you're more inclined to sort of get placed into that. But you're not going to get the full benefit of participation as a first-timer through an online participation. Now, I'm not trying to put the mockers on online, and all our people joining us online today, I'm sure you're getting a lot out of this, but it is, especially if you're new to the profession, new to the community. And that's why it would be good to see in sponsorship packages, a sponsor could, say, all right, and we will also, sponsor someone who is speaking for the first time, maybe at this conference or in general. Here's a special part of the gold, bronze or silver package that will enable you to do that. And the sponsor could be, thanked and acknowledged for doing that. Equally, for a new innovative topic or, sponsor for a new, inclusivity, sponsorship, diversity sponsorship package. So I think these are things that we can be doing, and certainly as Nicola and I were preparing for this, I've been carrying these ideas forward for the ICA Congress, and there is a lot of interest, in fact, in doing this and providing bursaries and assistance packages to bring new people, new voices into the profession, into the discussion. I thought you wanted me to talk for longer. I didn't realise you were trying to change this.
I'm trying to move us on, just failing miserably.
There you go.
So a couple of other enablers that we wanted to discuss is also about how we can enable people once they're physically at a conference as well. And some of this comes from the experiences that I have as the coordinator of the New Professionals program for the ICA that Nick mentioned. And one of the things we do there is, to be part of the program, it has to be your first time attending an ICA conference. So it is a huge learning curve, and they also get the experience of presenting for the first time. They do present together, which I think is a very different experience to presenting solo. And
it's horrible presenting with someone else.
It is what it's us, like. And also, possibly also, sorry for them, they get me as their chair, as their moderator. So it's someone they know, it's someone they've had a lot of discussion with before the presentation about how it's going to run and how we're going to make it work and how Q&A is going to work and how comfortable they are with responding to Q&A, because Q&A can be really scary for a first-time presenter. They're like, what are people going to ask? And I'm like, well, I can't actually predict that for you, but we'll have a bit of discussion about what people might ask and how you can respond and how you don't always have to have the answer in the room. And you can say, we'll follow up on that. We'll get back to you. We'll take that on board as feedback and, some strategies that people have to respond. So I think there is a role for the session chair when there are first-time presenters, and maybe people who haven't done it for a little while. I don't think it just has to be a first-time presenter. In that process, to make people feel more comfortable and to make sure that Q&A session is constructive.
Yeah, look, and I'll underemphasise that as well. I think the chair, we can really, for first-time speakers especially, but in fact for all speakers, I think we could be doing a bit more about preparing the session chairs as well. So if a first-time speaker is doing it, or someone new, from a different community is doing a presentation, it can be very intimidating to get a, say, controversial question or a difficult question. And I think part of what the session chair can do is to filter that question, to for the chair to take the question and then kind of filter it a bit, give the speaker a bit more thinking time, and then to rephrase the question in perhaps a less intimidating way or a less, even dare I say, controversial way, to allow that speaker to give a properly considered, answer, and for the chair to actually be a part of the response as well. So I think this is all part of welcoming people into the discussion, not making it a frightening, intimidating experience, and to have that whole sort of experience a very positive and very constructive experience. And I'm not sure that we do that enough. Look at our chair today. Look at him over there.
Yeah, we put a lot of pressure on him now. Yeah. He's like, oh.
What an easiest gig you've ever had, Nick. But I do think so, especially when we're preparing chairs, I think, for these sessions. I think there's a lot more we could do to invest in that, and it makes it better for participants, better for speakers, and better for the overall experience as well.
And just briefly, the other point, the idea of a conference buddy, again, is something we do with the new professionals. And it means that they get buddied with someone who has been to an ICA conference a few times is the idea. So they're more of a seasoned professional, I guess, in terms of the conference experience. So they, will have a person to go to at the welcome drinks. They will have someone who can then introduce them to other people. They can have someone to discuss their session or their presentation and things like that. So I think that can be a really useful way of actually opening up doors for people to, create networks realistically, but also then, if you've got a conference buddy, they should really come to your session. And it's so nice to have someone smiling at you from the audience, like going, yay, you're doing okay. It's not all terrible. So, so I think that's something that, it's really nice. And these are my new professionals from this year, so shout out to them because they were amazing and they did a great job. But we just wanted to conclude, but the whole idea, we wanted to bring this conversation, and we realize we are like the least representative people to be bringing this conversation, is that we really hope that we can keep moving towards a more open and inclusive profession. We wanted to have a think about why voices are missing from speaking, and appreciate the value of diversity and debate for the future of our profession. It's so key, and when we're challenged, we can progress and we can enact change, and I think that's something we all want to see. We can adopt practices that support members of all areas of the community to share their experiences at conferences and to challenge, and we are setting this ourselves, this challenge, I think, to create space for new voices. And I think, yes, David's already said he's on to the Congress, so that's definitely a nice big challenge for you. And obviously, hopefully, I will take some of these ideas forward for the ASA as well to see what we can implement. But we do acknowledge that change it's slow, and it always is, but we wanted to start this conversation so that we can see what we can do moving forward. And with that, thank you very much.
Well done. That was a fantastic presentation.
Thanks, Nicola and David. Now we have got a short time available to us for you to ask any questions. And wow, okay, we've got lots of questions. So just at the back first, we've got
Department of Health. And I'm going to do something I hate, which is, this is more of a comment, but as someone attending this conference in a wheelchair, I've had some very confronting impediments to participation in the last day, including because I presented twice and I facilitated yesterday afternoon. Everything was fine until I tried to get up onto the stage. So it's a really physical symbol of the barriers that people with disabilities might face. Now, we've gotten a long way. Like, I hope we always have hybrid conferences because they've opened up accessibility for people to attend. But when it actually comes, we need disabled voices here and on the stage, and we need to work to do a better job of making sure that they can be up there.
I think that's a really great point. Thank you, Michaela.
Hi, my name's Samara and I'm a recipient of the Sharman Award, so thank you very much, the ASA. Really appreciate it. And the conference is not over yet, so I'm not going to declare this this is my 5th conference in 15 years. I'm not going to declare this the best or the worst, but I will say, and this is a comment and maybe also for a response, that for me the most paradigm shifting conference was the one in Melbourne, 2017, which was a co-conference, a kind of a co-program, which was with the IC, and that was incredible. So I just wonder if there's also maybe some thinking to be done around a kind of a co-design program and thinking about, situating it within, I guess, maybe every second year or some, I'm not sure, but some way of kind of bringing in partners might be another thought.
Yeah, look, a very quick response because I know we're running out of time, Nick. But no, I think that's an excellent idea as well. And I think, then I'll put another plug, I guess, for the ICA Congress coming up next year. That's been muted a lot. to try and make it a valuable experience to go all the way. You know, it's an international conference, so if you're going to get on an international airfare, you want it to be worth your while. But would that be outside, would that still within, is there particular sectors that you work with? I mean, you mentioned the IT, or is it IT, heritage, are there social issues, or, yeah? I was Indigenous, wasn't it, in that case, yeah. All right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, no, thank you for that. I think we can take that.
We've just got one online question from Deb Lego. David, all good, valid suggestions. Any ideas on how to get more volunteers to dedicate more time to doing all this?
Well, often it's about funding. You know, it's because volunteers, you still need money to run a volunteer program, because, you know, volunteers, we can all give our time for free, but we don't own an aircraft, and we don't necessarily, you know, own a printing press or whatever else that we need. So I always think it comes down to funding, to try and budget in sufficient budget to make great use of volunteers. And the other thing is to make it a rewarding experience for volunteers as well. You know, we've got to, I mean, you do this very, very well, Nicola. I know you always do this well, but, you know, it's got to be, we've got to recognise and reward volunteers and make it a rewarding experience for volunteers as well. And that's the reason we all sort of put in so much, I think. So yeah, I think that'd be the two things that I'm always looking for.
Okay. We will have to move in on just for time reasons, but a lot for us to think about. Thank you, Nicola and David. And really good timing for us to start thinking about that with all these issues now in terms of planning for future conferences. So I'm sure there's ongoing discussion to be had.
Definitely.